Here's Spirit School, Chapter 7, entitled Tom. Soon it got dark and they were inside. They were all exhausted, and Anna decided to check on James. She knocked on the door and he let her in. He was looking forlorn. "How did it go with Wonder Boy?" he said. "Oh, don't be silly," she said. "It's just a bit of fun." She gave James a hug and they sat on the bed together. "I hope he doesn't spoil things," James said sadly. "Don't worry, he won't," Anna assured him. "I'll try to get on with him, but it may not be easy," James lamented. Lucy walked back with Tom, swinging their rackets merrily. He asked her into his room for coffee, and she obliged. They sat on the edge of the bunk chatting. He took off his shirt to reveal his rippling torso, and she blushed. He changed into his jeans and white t-shirt. He looked like a model, she thought. At that moment, he leaned closer to her and kissed her on the lips. It was a beautiful, soft kiss, and she surprised herself by kissing him back. It was amazing. A rush of excitement and love flooded through her. They kissed happily for another 10 minutes until they stopped breathing. Tom was looking very pleased with himself. "I have to go," she said. "It's getting late." "Cool," said Tom casually. "Let's chat over breakfast." Lucy headed back to her room feeling exhausted. That night she could hardly sleep. It had been a very exciting and unusual day. There was change in the air, and time would tell whether this was good or bad. The next day Tom was tucking into his breakfast like a soldier. He had a confident air about him which drew people in like a magnet. Lucy bounced in and stood next to him, and they exchanged happy glances to each other. They were joined by James and Anna, who were oblivious to the night's developments. James and Anna started chatting, and then Tom butted in, went for a long ramble about his life and his views on everything. Lucy hung on his every word and laughed at everything he said. By the time he had finished, it was time for another lesson. This time it was English literature. The teacher was a woman in her early 40s called Miss Dove. She had black hair and a pale, pretty face. She started off excitedly about the history of literature and all the great writers and characters. Then she asked for a volunteer to read aloud. Straight away Tom put his hand up. The poem he was asked to read was Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. It was an unusual and challenging poem to read aloud. His voice boomed around the classroom and he read very well. Each word was clear and he didn't stumble over the strange words. At the end he was given a standing ovation. "Bravo," said Miss Dove, beaming. He had another admirer. He sat down triumphantly. "Is there nothing he can't do?" thought James, irritated. Once again the girls were entranced, and then it was James's turn. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?" he intoned. He was nervous and sweat was forming on his brow and clammy hands. He read well, but not as well as Tom. He finished to a fair smattering of applause. He sat down slightly annoyed, and once again he glanced over to see Tom's superior grin. Finally the lesson ended, and James walked out with Lucy. "You did very well, thanks," James replied half-heartedly. "Yeah, but not as well as Tom." "Oh, it doesn't matter. It's not a competition." "It was to me," he said sulkily. Lucy put her arm around him, instantly making him feel better. "My place or yours," she said, laughing, and he fell onto the bed and into her arms. He was so tired that he fell asleep, and he had a strange dream. It was a night in his dream. He was a knight on a steed, and he faced the Jabberwocky, but this time it was wearing Tom's face. He charged and impaled the creature, and the ruby red blood ran down his silver lance. He woke sweaty and shaken, and the dream came back to him. The next day he met up with Lucy, and they strolled around the grounds, and when they got to the canteen, Tom and Anna were sitting together like lovebirds. Tom came over with his false smile. "Hi, how are you?" he said. "Great," said James, and he remembered the dream from the night before and felt guilty, but not for long. Tom and Anna were cooing and cuddling. James put his arms around Lucy. Everyone was smiling, but the tension in the air sparkled like electricity. It was a free day for everyone, and James suggested tennis. "Boring," said Tom. "Let's tramp through the woods and see what we can find." "We already tried that and got lost." "Getting lost is fun," he replied. "Let's do it," and they all reluctantly agreed. Tom marched off with the others, reluctantly following him. At last it was a dry, sunny day, and mud wasn't something the girls didn't appreciate. James and Lucy struggled to keep up as they were still half asleep. Tom marched into the woods, which was far more inviting in the daylight. He brushed the branches away and a rabbit scarpered from view. James followed half asleep with the girls behind him. After 500 yards, James stopped at the foot of a large pond. He sat on a rock waiting for the others, who soon caught up with him, panting hard. They were surprised to see the pond and relieved that they didn't fall in the night before. Anyone fancy a swim? Said James. Peeling off his shirt to reveal his torso, the girls giggled and James tried to protest as he hated the cold water. He gave in as he felt under pressure to complete in the cool stakes. He inched his foot into the annoyingly cold water. He could feel the girls watching him and he didn't want to wimp out. He waded in with a fixed smile on his face. The pond was about 200 yards across and he could feel the bottom. He swam to the middle and turned around to see the girls watching from the bank. Tom was swimming around the circumference in a big circle, shouting and hollering. James threw himself into the water and regretted it. How did I ever get into this? He thought. He was a good swimmer and he made a dive for the bottom. He tried not to think of the creatures swimming about as he was quite squeamish. He opened his eyes and could see a lot of different coloured fish swimming about like a rainbow in motion. He spotted a bicycle at the bottom and swam over to investigate. It was very rusty. He tried to move the pedal, but it was stiff. It was getting tired, and so he decided to swim back. As he did so, his foot caught round something. He pulled away, but whatever it was just pulled tighter. He started to panic and thrash around, causing large bubbles to spring to the surface. He could see the sunlight dappling on the surface, and he longed to get there. By now, he was feeling very weak and losing hope. The more he tugged, the tighter it became. It was probably that bloody bike chain, he thought. So much for my inquisitive nature. Suddenly he saw a shape above the water. Someone was diving in. The blur became clearer and he realized it was Tom swimming towards him. He was relieved, whoever it was. Tom grabbed the bike chain and wrestled with it, but by now James felt like passing out and everything was getting darker with the colours going out one by one. James heard a loud crack and then he felt Tom's arms around him. His foot felt free and he could feel himself rising to the surface. He gasped the air into his lungs as he surfaced to be blinded by the sunlight. Tom swam with him, dragging him as he did so. He placed him gently on the bank while the girls rushed over to see how he was. He was flustered and disorientated, but slowly he came back to reality. Lucy kissed him and Anna gave him a big hug. He was relieved to be safe and he swallowed his pride and went over to Tom to shake his hand. All of his animosity towards him disappeared. Thanks, man, he said. You did great. No problem, said Tom, flashing his famous white smile. This time it didn't annoy James, and he felt himself warming to him. After all, he had just saved his life.